Let's look at service-related issues now as more water woes for the city of Johannesburg as taps run dry in almost 30 suburbs yesterday. This as Joburg Water conducted unplanned maintenance at the Honeydew Reservoir. The water utility says the shutdown was necessary for the removal of a cracked level control valve from the reservoir. For more on this, we are joined by DA Ward Councillor in 99, that's Nicole Van Wyk. Nicole, good to have you on the program despite the circumstances. So the Honeydew Reservoir has been facing challenges for, 2 years now. And this recent unplanned maintenance has left 29 suburbs without water. Tell us about the root cause of this persistent water issue and what long-term solutions do you see for this community?
Well, I mean, we're always very happy to see that there's maintenance happening on these systems. Yes, the Honeydew system has been a major problem. It feeds a very large amount of suburbs, much of that within the Ravenshoek area, and that's a burgeoning area that continues to grow and more and more. And we're not seeing enough new infrastructure coming into place to support a lot of those areas. So that additional pressure is adding a lot of the additional pressure from those suburbs is adding a lot of additional pressure onto the systems, which is causing pressure fluctuations. This is often the cause of a lot of cracks that we see within our reservoirs and within our pipes. So we're hoping that this will finally bring some closure to a lot of these issues that residents are going through in the Honeydew area.
Yeah. When you look at the schedule, the maintenance is expected to last for 12 hours from what we've learned. But we've seen that water disruptions have become a frequent issue, especially in Johannesburg. Let's speak to how residents are coping with these interruptions, especially in areas much like Honeydew, Ridge as well, and also Zandspruit as well, who's experiencing the same issue.
Yeah, it's right across the city. I mean, in a couple of weeks' time, in just in 2 weeks, the whole of Midrand and Sandton will also be affected by Rand water maintenance. So there's a lot of ongoing maintenance, and maintenance, like I said, is always welcomed. As long as there's good communication, as we've seen in December, then residents are relatively happy. If they understand what's going on, then they know how to prepare and they're warned in advance, and that's a very good thing. A lot of the time, however, is we do see major bursts happening right across the city, and then it's an unplanned outage. Water then gets shut off at all those valves. Inlets are closed into the reservoir, so no water can come in, and the outlets are closed, so no water can go out. And residents are left without any sort of information. And not only that, we're also seeing it every night now. The Joburg Water is doing these restrictions on a very large number of reservoirs. So residents between the hours of 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. are also not having water. And in areas where it's poorer, where residents are getting up earlier for their jobs, that's having a major impact. And I think the biggest thing is residents only want communication, and not only communication on the outage, but also communication that says what this maintenance is, how long it's going to last, and what impact it's going to have on your lives in terms of an improved service delivery of water to your areas.
Councillor Van Wyk, a lot's been mentioned about the city's financial constraints in really addressing the aging infrastructure. How urgent is the need for investment, and what immediate measures can be taken to really alleviate, if you will, the pressure, especially on the Honeydew Reservoir specifically?
Well, I mean, we can't keep going to residents as a city and asking them to do more and more. So previously in your first question, you asked, what residents can do. A lot of residents, what they have been able to do, if they can afford it, is they start using JoJo tanks. They start digging into boreholes, and that alleviates some pressure off the system, but it's not enough to actually completely take the system off grid. And residents, unfortunately, the Honeydew Reservoir is part of the 22 reservoirs that are all leaking. And Joburg Water has said that it needs up to 3 billion rand, a minimum of 3 billion rand, to repair a lot of these outages, to repair a lot of these reservoirs. And specifically, that would apply similarly to the Honeydew Reservoir.
Right. But given the continuous challenges at the Honeydew Reservoir, but also the call that's emerged for the dissolution of the Joburg Water Board, what reforms do you think are necessary, especially within Johannesburg Water, to really improve its responsiveness, if you will, but also its efficacy?
So I think the very first thing, let's go back to finances. So the very first thing would be zero-based budgeting. This is difficult to start implementing in the City of Joburg, but it's one thing that will really start helping. Is if every single entity right across the city can motivate what money it needs, what its expenses are, what it's going to be planning for the rest of the year. We are not seeing that in a lot of these budgetary systems, especially for entities like the Department of Tourism, the Metropolitan Trading Company. That would be the first thing. The second thing on the dissolution of the board, there's only one engineer, technical engineer on the Joburg Water Board. The rest are just lawyers, they're accountants, they're daughters of politicians, unfortunately. So you're not dealing with people who understand risk management, asset management, financial and budget management. All of these play into how an entity would work, and that just doesn't exist there. So, and then the very third thing is, of course, any sort of money that comes into Joburg Water, because they're only getting 2 billion rand next year in the upcoming budget for their capital expenditure, they need much more than that. And Joburg Water's revenue contributes a lot of revenue to the city. And maybe a much larger portion of that funding that they bring in needs to be ring-fenced and actually used for Joburg Water projects, not only in terms of capital expenditure, but your basic day-to-day maintenance of pipe replacements, reservoir maintenance. These are things that we haven't been seeing for about 2 or 3 years now. And I think the biggest stat that comes out of that is Joburg Water should be replacing around 150 kilometers of piping a year. And right now they're only replacing up to between 28 and 30 kilometers a year. And that would alleviate a lot of that pressure.
Right. Safe to say that residents in this area are demanding answers. Let's speak to the communication plan. How can Johannesburg Water improve, especially its communication strategy with affected residents when these disruptions actually occur? Or even what improvements can be made in really informing the public ahead of time, but also managing their expectations during maintenance?
So I think one of the first things is talking about how you plan to keep water in the system while maintenance is happening. Previously, in all the major shutdowns that we've had, where Joburg Water has kept a certain level of water within the system, then your recovery time's a lot quicker. I think the biggest thing that is always hardest for residents to understand, and we see it very often in outages, is when residents, they are subject to gravity. So the residents who are on a lower level will lose water last and get it back first. Those on a higher level will receive it last and be first to lose it. So it becomes a really difficult thing for residents to understand that, and I don't think Joburg Water is doing enough to communicate that. All that they're saying is that we're aware of the problem, it's on schedule, and water will return shortly. The other big communication issue that always comes in terms of these outages, and councillors always try and get involved in this, is where water tankers are placed. Now, every time that there's going to be a major outage within any area, the ward councillors of those areas are consulted and we give those tanker placements. A lot of the times those tanker placements aren't actually met. It causes a lot of fights between councillors and residents and Joburg Water. So if Joburg Water sticks to those placements and also is able to give some sort of estimated time of when those tankers will arrive and how long they'll be there for, that would be key as well.
Right. Of course, you're speaking to us in your capacity as a DA councillor, and your party has been very vocal about the city's water crisis. What role do you think, especially local governments, should play in both addressing the immediate needs of the affected communities, but also investing in long-term solutions for the city's water infrastructure?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, so we've got 120 reservoirs across the city. 50% of those have some sort of major issue. 22% of them are in critical state. So the very first thing would be, like I said, to get more of the money that Joburg Water brings in terms of their revenue, get that ring fence, then bring it back into Johannesburg so that they've got more of an operational budget and capital budget from which to work with. From that, what they need to do is basic maintenance, also repair a lot of the reservoirs that are not working, but at the very same time, have reservoirs where you can keep backup storage capacity. We're seeing this in a lot of other cities, especially in the Western Cape, where you've got this backup storage capacity so that when these outages do hit, you do still have some to draw from. Of course, the biggest issue that Joburg Water faces that needs to be fixed in order to alleviate a lot of what residents are going through is the 46% non-technical water losses. Now, Joburg Water will attribute a lot of that to illegal connections, which of course is a factor. And that's who they're going after first, but that's your most vulnerable community, and they haven't been given access to water. So for them to illegally connect, it's not right, but anyone with compassion can understand why they're doing that. Another big thing, a lot of national government departments and provincial government departments owe Joburg Water significant sums of money. And that could bring a lot of additional funding in to start alleviate Joburg Water's problems. Joburg Water said to us 2 years ago that they're going to become the next Eskom because they haven't been given the funding that they need to do the bare basic maintenance to get the city through what's going on. And of course, finally and lastly, Joburg is a city that everybody comes to for economic opportunity, for hope. And unfortunately, with all of those people flooding into the city, we are not keeping up with the demand for that supply.
Councillor Van Wyk, as we wrap, I think it's important for us to also highlight or crystallize some of the points that you make, and also with the ongoing pressure, especially on the city's water resources and infrastructure. Maybe let's speak about the most critical steps that Johannesburg's local government and water utility should take, especially in the next 12 months, to avoid these disruptions from worsening.
So the next 12 months, Joburg Water has finally instituted a turnaround strategy. This was passed in council in August of last year. A big thing about this comes down to basic governance. And governance often leads back to how tenders are set out and awarded by the City of Johannesburg, as well as how boards are appointed. And Joburg Water made big notice of that within their turnaround strategy, that there can't be this political interference in the board. So going back to the point, starting to get technical engineers, water experts onto that board of directors and having them start to guide the city through rather than people with no water expertise. And then making sure that any funding that is allocated to the entity is properly accounted for. As we currently sit, there's a 263 million rand tender that's been given to 2 companies that don't seem to really exist to supply water tankers for the city. Now, 263 million rand, that can buy you 175 water tankers. And that would actually be owned by the city. We could also lease those out, create additional revenue. But until you actually start addressing even smaller issues, just like basic pipe maintenance, both on a sewer network and on a water network, we aren't going to see things improve. So if Joburg Water focuses on dropping the non-technical revenue water losses, start fixing the leaks as they occur within the 24-hour SLA, we'll start seeing a lot of pressure reduced, especially as Rand Water is going to reduce our pressure by 400 megalitres by September next year, which is going to have a very significant impact on high-lying areas.
Thank you so much, Councillor Nicole Van Wyk, joining us today and sharing her insights into the ongoing water challenges, specifically in Johannesburg, and speaking to areas such as Honeydew and Zandspruit as well, which have also been impacted.